Before we continue from where we left off, I want to just share something with you, review something with you that we mentioned last time, but something I want to show you. So, if you remember last time, we looked at the mental judgments, al-ahkam al-aqliyah, and we said these mental judgments, they gauge existence. The necessary is what must exist. The impossible is what can't exist. And the possible could be existent or non-existent. And I said to you, possible is in the middle here, so to give you a balance. So necessary is on one end, what must exist. And impossible is on the other end, what can't exist. And possible is in the middle. It could exist or it might not exist. I mentioned that for you last time. And also, there was another balance I gave you that I shared with you, Yanni. We said knowledge means to realize something as it is. Yani, knowledge is for your conception to be in tune with reality, for your perception to be in tune with reality, to realize something as it is. And ignorance is the lack of knowledge. Yani, that's fundamental meaning of ignorance. We have more to say. You know, this is a review. So knowledge is to realize something as it is, truly. And ignorance is a fundamental lack of knowledge altogether. It means to not know something. And from here also we did a balance. So we said in the middle is doubt. Doubt is not more is not more inclined one way or the other way. And if you're confident that something is true, with room for error on your part though, then you think it's true. And if you think it might not be true, it's probably not true. It's improbable. So then goes towards the side of ignorance. What I'm saying is, and this is what we mentioned last time, if we were to say knowledge is 100% and ignorance is 0%, then doubt is 50% and confidence is 51 to 99%. And skepticism is 49 to 1%. So that's a balance for you. Or if you want, it's a gauge of a sort for you, like a thermometer, from 0 to 100. And there was another balance. Also, we mentioned the religious judgments. The religious judgments gauge the deeds of the accountable God slaves. The obligatory, the recommended, the indifferent, the avoided, and the forbidden. This whole paragraph here was just slightly rearranged from last week. So what's your scale here? Your balance here? Your balance here is that obligatory is on one end. Because that's the thing that if you do it, you deserve reward. And if you don't do it, you deserve punishment. And forbidden is on the other end. That's the thing, if you do it, you deserve punishment. If you don't do it with a good intention, then you deserve reward. And in the middle is the indifferent. If you do it or you don't do it, there's no reward and there's no punishment. But going towards the side of reward, you also have the recommended. So the recommended is what, if you do it, you deserve the reward. But if you don't do it, there's no punishment. And the avoided is what, if you do it, there's no punishment. But if you don't do it, you deserve reward with a good intention if you don't do it with a good intention. So here, the way it's listed for you here also is like a scale for you or a balance for you. The obligatory, you have to do it. The recommended, you should do it. The indifferent, whether you do it or you don't do it, it's the same. The avoided, better not to do it. And the forbidden, you can't do it. So if you want, just so you can have also a balance or a thermometer if you want to gauge those things. If you have any question, feel free, please. Now we want to continue our review. This is a review, so I'll try to keep the explanation to a minimal, insha'Allah ta'ala. And if you have any questions, feel free, and maybe I'll ask you some questions. So now we're on the book of knowledge. And the author says, knowledge is the attribute of a knower. It is impossible to confirm one and deny the other. If you confirm either one of these, knowledge or knower, then you'll confirm the other one. So if you confirm knowledge, then there must be a knower for this knowledge. And if you confirm a knower, then there must be knowledge for this knower. But if the knowledge is the uncreated knowledge, then the knower is going to be the uncreated knower. If the knowledge is the uncreated knowledge, then the knower is going to be the uncreated knower. If the knowledge is created knowledge, then the knower is going to be a created knower. And then they can't be alike. Even if you called both of them knowledge and even if you called both of them knower, they're not going to be alike. Because you can't replace them, you can't exchange them, you can't put one in the place of the other. You can't substitute them. You can't give the uncreated knowledge to the created knower, and you can't give the created knowledge to the uncreated knower. So they're not similar. Even if you use the same words. By uncreated knowledge, Allah knows everything known. Now the known thing, or the known matter if you want, what's known might be created or might not be created. What's known might be created or might not be created. Because Allah is known. He knows himself. And his slaves know and his slaves know him with their created knowledge, but they don't encompass him with their knowledge. And they don't know his reality. So by uncreated knowledge, Allah knows everything known. No one shares this attribute with him. Eventual knowledge means created knowledge. Because event means has a beginning. Event means happened. Eventual knowledge happens to some creations, living ones. Their knowledge is a transient property. Transient means comes and goes, not permanent, yani not necessarily permanent. Subject to coming and going and fluctuation, changing. Their knowledge is a transient property, susceptible to increase and decrease. And it is limited. That's the created knowledge. Imam al-Tahawi said, so now we talk about the created knowledge. We really want to focus on created knowledge here. Most of our talk here is about created knowledge. Imam al-Tahawi said, لِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ عِلْمًا. There are two types of knowledge. عِلْمٌ فِي الْخَلْقِ مَوْجُودٌ. Knowledge accessible to the creation. وَعِلْمٌ فِي الْخَلْقِ مَفْقُودٌ. And knowledge inaccessible to the creation. So if I translate very literally, knowledge that is present in the creation or existent in the creation, and knowledge that is missing from the creation or lacking, knowledge that is lacking in the creation. فَإِنْكَارُ الْعِلْمِ الْمَوْجُودِ كُفْرٌ. Denying accessible knowledge is blasphemy. But don't ask me any blasphemy questions from that statement though. And claiming inaccessible knowledge is blasphemy. Here we have a footnote here. Denying that there is such knowledge is blasphemy. Denying accessible knowledge is blasphemy. Denying that there is such knowledge is blasphemy, such as the sophists' denial of the existence of the world. So that's an example. Don't try to go far here, though, because don't look for blasphemy and search for blasphemy in every nook and cranny, and then you have many questions about blasphemy. So denying that there is such knowledge is that, such as the sophists' denial of the existence of the world. Their creed is that everything is mere imagination. There is also an ancient group called the Sumaniya. They are Hindu philosophers who denied necessary knowledge that does not need contemplation. I'm not going to go farther in that footnote. But this footnote here goes up here. And claiming inaccessible knowledge is blasphemy, like claiming to know when Judgment Day will occur. Belief is not confirmed until one accepts accessible knowledge and does not seek the inaccessible knowledge. So that's the statement of At-Tahawi. They're very lofty statement, as you can see. At-Tahawi is a very educated person, rahimahullah ta'ala. Knowledge accessible to creations is what Allah made a way for them to gain. And He made it possible for them to know, including religious sciences and worldly disciplines. Worldly disciplines like math and languages and what people might call trades. That's such as masonry and carpentry and being an electrician, and things like that. Learning that is praiseworthy. However, some accessible knowledge is forbidden, like philosophy, magic, and astrology. Philosophy is crooked thinking. We talked about this so many times. So, because of philosophy, someone's going to say, I think the sun is not moving. And I think the earth is moving. And in fact, I think my house is moving. And because of philosophy, someone's going to say, maybe everything around me doesn't even exist. And like that. And because of philosophy, someone's going to say, the creator is eternal and the creation is eternal too. There's two types of eternity. That's blasphemy. This is haram. And magic, that's haram. Learning it and teaching it is haram. And astrology, what's meant here is fortune telling. Learning about that is haram in all forms, like reading the stars and reading the palms and using tarot cards and throwing bones like dice, or looking into a cup of coffee. I don't know if crystal ball is something real or it's just from TV. If it is real, you can't do that either. There is also knowledge that Allah has reserved for Himself. And claiming to have that knowledge is blasphemy. Like claiming to know everything. That's blasphemy. Only Allah knows everything. Or that someone else knows everything. Like some people say Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he knows everything that Allah knows. That's blasphemy. Or claiming to know when Judgment Day will occur. The mere attempt to decipher when Judgment Day occurs is blasphemy. Prophets and angels are granted some knowledge of the unseen. Prophets and angels are granted some knowledge of the unseen without being mistaken. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ tell the future sometimes? So, yes, that's, he has prophecies that he told, and they're always true. And the angels also, Allah reveals to them some of the future, for example. That's the meaning of تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. It means on the night of Al-Qadr, Allah reveals to the angels what shall come until the next Laylatul Qadr. He reveals to the angels who will die and who will get sick or get money, etc. And that doesn't mean every detail, no. So they know some of the unseen without being mistaken. The angels don't know all of the unseen. Sometimes the angels will have in their documents that so and so will do this or this, and they don't even know which one he's going to do. And then they will go and watch, and then they will see which one he does, and the one he does, the one that he doesn't do, they cross it out. And saints might know some of the unseen, but they could be mistaken. So if a saint told you that something's going to happen in the future, if he doesn't have an ayah from the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, then you don't have to believe it. He could be mistaken. Allah Ta'ala says, قُلْ لَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ الْغَيْبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Say, O Muhammad, whoever is in the skies and the earth, or anyone in the skies and the earth, does not know all of the unseen. Only Allah knows all of it. Where's this ayah? We need to put, someone will tell me where this ayah is, then inshallah you'll share in some reward of the book, so I can put the ayah there. Muslim narrated that Zayd ibn Arqam reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa du'a'in la yusma' wa nafsin la tashba' wa qalbin la yakhsha'. Oh Allah, certainly I seek refuge with you from knowledge without benefit, from supplication unheard, that means unaccepted, from an insatiable self, that means a self that's never satisfied, and from a heart fearless of God. Created knowledge is either necessary or inferred, and eternal knowledge is neither necessary nor inferred. They are unalike. So we're going to focus on the created knowledge. We want to review what's necessary knowledge and what's inferred knowledge. Necessary knowledge. Linguistically, the daruri, necessity, is indispensable. Why are we mentioning this? Because the origin is Arabic. The official religious language is Arabic. So in Arabic, this is called ilm daruri, which would translate as necessary knowledge. So what is this necessity of which we speak? And what's the Arabic word? So the Arabic word is daruri, necessary or necessity. What does that mean linguistically? It means something that's indispensable. That means you can't do without it. The daruri is what you can't do without. That's what it means linguistically. And it also means linguistically what is granted. Granted means intuitive and understood without thinking. And that is the relevant meaning. So if you were talking in Arabic and someone said something that is intuitive, we'll see examples of that. Then in Arabic you might say daruri, means yeah, of course, it's daruri. That means granted, is understood without thinking, very basic, elementary. Therefore, necessary knowledge is what does not depend upon contemplation or inference. Necessary knowledge is knowledge that does not depend upon contemplation or inference. What is knowledge? Knowledge is a perception that complies with reality. So there's reality. We live in this world. There's a sky above us, and there's an earth upon which we live. And there's things around us, trees and cars. There's people who live in this world. Some people have passed away, and there's people who shall come to be born. That's all real. So when your perception is in tune with this reality, then this is knowledge. That doesn't mean that you had to think about it to know it. To say that you have knowledge doesn't mean that you necessarily had to think about it to know it. That's why I'm saying if your knowledge is in tune with reality, like, for example, as we mentioned before, okay, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he existed for sure, and the Kaaba exists. And the little child who is not a researcher, nor is he capable of doing complex deductions, he knows that Prophet Muhammad, and he knows about Prophet Muhammad, and he knows about the Kaaba. It's not just a coincidence, not like, he thinks there's a man named Muhammad, and there actually was a man named Muhammad. He thinks there was a man named Muhammad, and there actually was a man named Muhammad, but we're not going to say it's knowledge. He doesn't really know, although Muhammad existed. No, no, no. Rather, we're going to say he has knowledge, because Muhammad existed, and he knows Muhammad. Yani, his perception is in tune with reality, even if he didn't have to think to get there. That's knowledge. Necessary knowledge is what does not depend upon contemplation or inference. By mere exposure, the human is compelled to realize it, to realize the necessary knowledge. By mere exposure, the human is compelled to realize the necessary knowledge. So, there was a person in the room with you, you didn't know, and then you turned around and you saw him, and then you knew. By mere exposure, you are compelled to know now that this one is in the room with you. Or, for example, you didn't know something was written somewhere. Let's say you didn't even want to know if it was written. You weren't interested in knowing, and then someone came and put it right in your face. You didn't know what you were about to see, and then you looked at it, and then you saw it written there. Now you know, and there's nothing you can do to stop yourself. You are compelled to realize it. Necessary knowledge is knowledge that does not depend upon contemplation or inference. By mere exposure, the human is compelled to realize it and unable to resist knowing it. It is knowledge born through sound senses. So you heard something, you saw something. You went to the pizza shop and you said, "Give me a slice of cheese." And then you bit into your slice of cheese and you could taste the pepperoni from the pizza slicer. Now you know, because you can taste it. You can't stop yourself from knowing. Necessary knowledge is knowledge born through sound senses, and also knowledge that is installed by successively mass narrated information, which we'll come to talk about, and intuition. Intuition here means most immediate function of the mind. And we have examples for all of those. Like knowing that someone is in the room with you by your senses. Or knowing that China exists without having been there. That's the successive mass narration. Or knowing that some of something is less than all of it. That's intuitive. If you have any question, go ahead and ask, please. Inferred knowledge. Inferred or concluded knowledge, or proven knowledge, or argued knowledge is what depends upon contemplation and inference, meaning it depends upon proof. It is not granted. That means it's not automatic. But just because it's not automatic doesn't mean it's not knowledge. For example, we know that the world is an event, that means has a beginning, without witnessing its initial start. Someone might say to you, "How do you know the world has a beginning? You weren't there." So you say to him, just think a little bit. Put your facts together and you'll know it also, even though you weren't there. Achieving such knowledge needs contemplation on the state of the world. Like, looking at the world and saying, this world changes. Now it's rainy. Before that, it was sunny. And now it's hot. And before that, it was cold, etc., etc. Now there's buildings here. Before that, there's just a forest here. This world changes. And then you infer a conclusion from witnessing its changes. The mind uses its confirmed changing, the world's confirmed changing. The mind uses that to conclude the judgment that the world is therefore itself an event that happened. The whole world is something that has a beginning. Now, this paragraph doesn't spell out all the steps. How did you get from the premise to the conclusion? What's mentioned here is condensed for you, and we will unravel it later, inshallah, when we talk about deduction. Now we're talking about inferred knowledge, and we're not talking about deduction per se. If you have a question, go ahead and ask. I'm hopeful that this is all very clear since we're repeating it, and that it is, yani, nice for you. Now it's not new for you, inshallah ta'ala. So hearing it again is, I hope, exhilarating for you. The author says, the known. Knowledge is for what is known. Like sight relates to the seen and hearing pertains to the heard. That's clear, inshallah. Originally, ilm, knowledge, is the attribute of an alim, a knower, like we said already. But the word ilm, knowledge, might sometimes refer to the ma'loom, what is known. We have a footnote here. There are three things: knowledge, knower, and known. So contemplate on that. Knowledge is the attribute of the knower. By knowledge, whoever has it is a knower. Without knowledge, he wouldn't be a knower. And the known, however, such as a person or a fact, is other than the knowledge. The known is not the knowledge. However, sometimes the known is referred to as knowledge. Sometimes the known is called knowledge. So we say, for example, Allah is known. So that doesn't mean Allah is knowledge. No. So the known is not the knowledge. You might say, I am known. That doesn't mean I am knowledge. But you can sometimes use the word knowledge to mean known. Such as when Allah says, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. They do not encompass any of His ilm except what He willed. So this means they do not encompass any of His ma'loom, what He knows. And that's in the books of tafsir. Since there are two types of knowledge, necessary knowledge and inferred knowledge, a thing would be known by necessity or by inference. A thing would be known, ma'loom, by necessity, or known by inference, known by deduction, known by conclusion. Any question? Okay, I want to give you a quick benefit here. Digression here before I keep reading. So I just said to you, Allah is known. And you can't say Allah is knowledge. So that tells you the difference between the knowledge and the known. Okay. So in this case, when we say Allah is known, this would mean that the known is eternal. The known, in this case, is eternal. Allah is known, so the known here is eternal. So when the scholars say the speech of Allah is recited, the speech of Allah is recited, that it's like saying known, recited. They're talking about the eternal attribute. The eternal attribute is recited. What does that mean? That means there's something created that refers to it. They say the speech of Allah is written. What does this mean? This means there's writing that refers to something eternal. When they say the speech of Allah is written, they're not talking about the writing. When they say speech of Allah, they're not talking about the writing. They talk about what the writing refers to. So take that and let's get back here. So we're talking about the known. And we're saying that something is known necessarily or known by inference. And apparently that's all clear. No one has a question, which that's great. So here's a benefit. Is God's existence necessarily known or is it inferred? Our scholars do not differ that anything with a beginning needs what made it occur. But they did differ about what type of knowledge that is. Some said that such knowledge is intuitive, that if something has a beginning, it needs what makes it occur. So if that's intuitive, then that means God's existence is known by necessity, because intuition promotes necessary knowledge. You said God's existence is necessary. This necessary that you're talking about, what does it refer to? Does it refer to knowledge or does it refer to existence? So that's different from what we're talking about, right? Because we're talking about knowledge. Is his existence known by necessity or is it known by inference? Yes, barakallahu fikum. Like we said in the beginning of the lesson, there's a group of judgments called the intellectual judgments. That's what you're talking about. Now, we're not talking about the intellectual judgments. Now we're talking about knowledge. The intellectual judgments address existence. Now we're talking about knowledge. So is God's existence necessarily known or inferred? Yani, is it known by inference? Some said that such knowledge is intuitive. Said Surah An-Naml ayah 65. Surah An-Naml ayah 65. Okay, for the ayah. Yes. Barakallahu feek. May Allah grant you a share in the reward. Surah An-Naml ayah 65. Imam Al-Fakhr said in Al-Ma'alim, it is embedded in the nature of the children. Had you smacked the child once he did not see, and you smacked him without him seeing you, and then said to that child that no one smacked him, he would not believe you. In fact, it is embedded in the nature of the animals. Had a donkey detected the sound of wood snapping, or the sound of snapping wood, it would become alert, because it is embedded in its nature that the sound of snapping wood means that something happened. Others said that this knowledge is truly contemplated, the knowledge that God exists, not necessary. This is the case of most people. This statement here, that's from our Sheikh. However, one arrives at that conclusion by a very simple introspection. Yani, introspection means to look inward. So it is still inferred, meaning so easy to realize that God exists. But it's still an inference because you just have to think a little bit. But when we say here, this is the case of most people, this statement means there are slaves of God who know that he exists without ever thinking about it. Since it is so obvious that there is a creator, some thought that that knowledge is necessary for everyone. But it's not necessary for everyone. And Allah knows best. وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ